Moving along, I'll select the axis, axis 5, that is affecting the animated graph. I want its Z position to be about 300. I'll click in the Y field and drag it down to about minus 380 to bring it down to the lower corner. In fact, I'll click once again in the field and enter exactly minus 380. I'll select the axis number 6, that is affecting the brain response indicator image. Its Z position is going to be positive 256, its Y position is 290, and the X position will be 400. Then we'll scale this down about 35. I think I forgot something, which was our axis 5's scale. Yes, I select axis 5 once again. I never adjusted our scale, so let me set the scale property with proportional on to 55. Now I'll select the next axis, axis 7 for rotary. Z position is going to be minus 40. Y position, minus 55. X position, 770. We'll leave its scale at 100. Now I'll activate our working view. I'll go back and get our orbit tool once again from our flyout of our tools. And now as I orbit around, you can see that we've placed these different elements in 3D space. We scaled some of them down. By adjusting the blend mode and the transparency, we are creating the heads-up display. One thing that I'm noticing right away though is the code itself, the footage, has graphics that are appearing directly in Arthur's face, the Talon's face. I don't like that. I do not want that. Now, of course, there are multiple ways that we could create masks to eliminate these elements in that actual footage. We could do it in the action tool, or we could do it out in ConnectFX and affect the image before it even comes into the action tool. And that is what I'm going to do. Let me switch back to a 2-view up layout. I'll leave this view on the right set to be the output of whatever I select. That's F4. This viewport on the left, I'll hold Option, hit Escape. That'll set this viewport to the ConnectFX schematic. So looking in the ConnectFX schematic, we can see here is the main footage that is the code footage. And there's the Mux node that we use to offset the frames that were being used. So let's go to our tools for our ConnectFX. I'll click the FX node button. I'll bring my cursor over the nodes and hit the G key to get the garbage mask. I'll drag it up and drop it into the schematic. Let me zoom in here and we'll make a little room for ourselves, moving our nodes around. Let's take the output of the Mux node, the yellow output, feed it into the red input of the garbage mask. Then, I'll zoom back a little more. We want to take the output of the garbage mask and feed it into the blue input for that layer. So this is what our connection should look like. This viewport over here is showing us the output of the garbage mask. But once again, as before, we've not created a mask, so that's why we have a solid white frame. Let's hide our effects nodes by clicking on them down here to get rid of them. I'll activate this viewport on the right-hand side, and then I'll hit the F1 key to view the incoming footage to the garbage mask. Down on the UI, I'll choose Add to create a mask, and I'm just going to draw a mask around this graphic that we have up here. I'll hit F4 to see the end result. Now the default is the pixels in the mask are going to be displayed, and that's not what I want. I want to invert this. So I choose the outside option, and this is what I want. So now if we go over to our schematic, pan over and select the action tool, you'll see those elements of the code footage are no longer part of the action output. All right, once again with the action tool selected, on this view over here on the left, I'll hit the escape key to return into the action schematic. I'll also switch my view to fit so I see everything. Now I want to rotate and scale all these layers at one time. I do not want to use this tracker axis, so we're going to go back to our action bin. I'll add another axis into my schematic, hold the shift key, and I'll kiss and connect it. So this is the top hierarchy of all transformation. First thing I want to do is rotate it on the Y. So I can rotate this on the Y, bring it to about 40. Let's scale it down a little bit. Proportional is on for the scale parameter. I'm going to bring this down to about 65, 66 or something like that. Let's move it over a little bit on the X. So I'll drag this to a negative 125 or until it looks like it belongs in the scene. Negative 129 looks good. Then we'll adjust our Y position. I'll take this to a negative 104. somewhere around there. Again, it doesn't have to be exact. Just make sure it looks good in the scene. Now remember, in the end result, there was a really cool looking depth of field blur happening to the elements of the heads-up display. It gave it a very distinct look. So the point of this action tool, what we're doing right now, is not to composite this heads-up display over our background footage. We're going to do that in a minute on another tool. For right now, I want to output not just my RGB output of the heads-up display, but I also want to output a Z-depth pass. So the next thing I want to do is go back to my Media tab, and I will turn the back off. I do not want this background to be part of my output. And by turning it off, it is no longer part of that. You could have also just disconnected it in ConnectFX, and the end result would have been the same. Now we go to the Output tab, and you'll notice there's two outputs by default. There is the Comp output, which is the main output. There's also a Matte output. And if I select the viewport on the right and I toggle by hitting the F4 key, you can see the end result of the different outputs from the Action tool. To really demonstrate this, let me activate this viewport over here with our Action schematic. I'll hold Option and hit Escape, and there is the Action node, and you can see the two outputs, the main yellow output and the blue matte output. But you can add multiple outputs coming out of the Action tool, and you control what type of output it is from the type flyout, whether it's AO for ambient occlusion, shadow, Z-depth, matte media, and matte or comp. So with the main comp selected, I will choose Copy, and now you see a new output has been added. I will click on it and choose Rename. I'm going to name this Z-depth. Then from the output type, I will switch this to Z-depth. Notice immediately that the Action tool now just displays a gray output. That's indicating that you have more than two outputs. We'll address this in just 1 second. Let's activate this viewport here and hit the F4 key. So there's my matte, there's my Z-depth, and there's my comp. So we have 3 different outputs coming out of the Action tool. Back to the Action node. To expose multiple outputs, if you have more than 2, what you can do is with the Action node selected, you can hold the Option key and hit the C key. That will expose the Action tool in a larger node with all outputs available to you. So the point of this is we want to create the depth of field right here inside of Smoke. Let me zoom back a little bit. There's our main output. Let's move it over here. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Let's go back to our Effects node now. Locate the depth of field tool, which is right here. I'll drag it, drop it right on the node while holding the Option key. That will automatically feed in the input for the main input. Whenever you see a red dot of a node, it's telling you that something is not right. And in this case, the Z-depth has to have an input to the Z-depth input, which is right here, the gray one. So I'll drag out of the Z-depth from the Action tool, and I'll feed it into the Z-depth input for the depth of field tool. And immediately the red dot goes away, and now we're seeing the end result of the depth of field tool in this viewport. But we haven't adjusted the blur yet. So let's double click on the depth of field. So on the depth of field parameters over here under blur, I'll take this and drag this drastic to about 650. Immediately you can see that the entire image, all the different layers are being blurred. That's because we haven't adjusted our focus plane, our focus offset, or our focus range to let this tool understand where those layers are in 3D space. And there's a couple different ways of doing this. You'll notice over here, I have my focus plane option, my focus offset, and my focus range. The easiest way to do this is grab the yellow bar and just start making an adjustment. This is your focus plane. You'll notice the value is changing in the field as I move this around. Also notice in the viewport, you get a checkerboard pattern, and anything that's in that checkerboard pattern will be blurred. Watch what happens as I drag to the left. All of a sudden, we start to see elements that will be in focus indicated by the blue line surrounding it. Once I bring my focus plane to about 0.26, I release this. You'll notice that the elements or the layers that were still in that checkerboard pattern are still blurred, but the elements that were not in that checkerboard pattern are now in focus. If I grab the blue line in the depthogram, I can start adjusting our focus range. I can also select the red, and this is going to also adjust the focus range. If you want to make an adjustment directly in one of the fields, whether it's the focus plane, the focus offset, or the focus range, you can do that also. So I'll end up with a value of blur set to 649. I have a focus plane of 0.26. I have the focus offset of 53. And I have my focus range set at 0.22. Now let's composite this over our original background. So I'm going to zoom back in my schematic on the left. I'll move my output node a little bit to give me some more room. I go to my effects node. I'll hit C over my tools to get my comp node. I'll take the comp node, hold the option key, and drop it over the red connection line. That is going to automatically feed the output of the depth of field into the first input of my comp node. Then once again, I'll click on the second input for the comp node to highlight it. Then I'll go down to the mux node that is applied to our original background footage, and I'll click on the yellow output of that, which then creates the connection. Or if you wanted to, I can cut that by dragging across. You can always just click and drag off of the output and drop it on the highlighted input of the comp node. Same end result. Let me double click on my comp node to get its parameters. You have your blend type. Switch this to screen. And now we have the end result of what we were trying to achieve. Keep in mind though, everything is non-destructive here in Smoke, meaning we can go back and change any part of this composite at any time that we need to, including the original ConnectFX node that we created out in our timeline. If I needed to make a change to any part of this, I easily can. Also, I should point out that you can always have a viewport looking at the end result of ConnectFX. You don't have to set up a context node to do that. So if I activate this viewport on the right and I go to my viewing tab, I can choose ConnectFX result or hit the 0 key. Now, no matter what I select, I'm going to always be looking at the end result, which is this node going back out to my timeline. So for example, if we had to go back and select the original color correction node, we can make an adjustment and it would flow through all the nodes and go back out to the timeline. In the action tool, if I wanted to step back into the action tool, I hit the escape key. I can select any one of these individual layers and I can start moving it in Z space, make an adjustment to it. You will see it updating in the end result of the ConnectFX output. Let me undo that. All right, I'm happy with this. I'm going to go back to my schematic view for my ConnectFX, and you could render this right from in here by clicking the render button, or you can choose exit CFX, which will take you back out to your timeline. Notice when I go back out to my timeline, all those layers that had those images, when I converted them into ConnectFX, are now empty layers. So if you want to, you can come and you can select all of them. I'll deselect the bottom layer actually while holding the command key and just drag all these to the bottom of the UI, and I throw all those empty layers away. I can adjust my UI, and I can also choose fit to bring this to full frame. Now I want to render this. I choose, so I'll select the layer and choose render selected. All right, this is going to take about 3.5 minutes to render this, so I'll do a little creative editing and we'll be right back. All right, the render is finished. We can now play back the end result. I'll hit the L key. All right, that looks great. And more importantly is remember that you can always go back into ConnectFX very easily to make any adjustments if the end result didn't turn out the way you wanted it to. And in the film, there were many scenes where they needed the heads-up display. What's great is they were just able to repurpose this. Going back into ConnectFX, they can easily readjust the positioning with the main axis that we created in our action tool. We go back into action. I'll pan over. So they were able to use this axis, our master axis, if you will, to make any adjustment to the actual heads-up display to fit the new footage. They would also have to change the axis of the track data to the new backplate that was being used in this shot. But as you know, that's really easy to do in action. I'll go back out to ConnectFX. They can easily take the original group. I'll right-click, choose Ungroup, which then expands everything, and they can replace this footage with the new footage that is needed for that shot and change the background plate. So by saving the ConnectFX setup, they were able to repurpose all this work that they've done for every shot where the heads-up display was needed again. I'll choose the Exit ConnectFX button to go back out to our timeline. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you've learned a lot. I know it was a long one. We covered a lot of material. This was a pretty complex shot. Look for new tutorials coming from me soon, and once again, thanks for watching.